Shalom, family. It has been a minute since I have been on TikTok, and I honestly have like a number of videos that I know I need to be making. Like, I don't even know how long it's going to take me to catch up, but I decided to come on with my first one based on just a conversation that I just had with a brother. Um, And it's related to actually something that a sister shared on here, that a video I saw a few days ago. I think some of you guys will recognize it. It's a sister that is like new on here, and I don't remember her name. She's younger. I think she has blonde hair or like dirty blonde hair. But she goes over in her video what Abarit means, which is Hebrew. What does it actually mean to be Hebrew? And it was a wonderful study, and I wasn't necessarily intending on going there with my mind today, but the Father just led to something so beautiful. So I was discussing studying Daniel basically with a brother, just sharing some of my experience. Like, I'll just show you real quick. I was breaking apart. I decided last night randomly to get into Daniel, and I am breaking apart the names of Daniel, doing Hebrew studies and stuff. And I shared some of the information that I gathered, which was completely unrelated to this video. But I was sharing something from my study with this brother, and he then asked a question of like, I wonder what the religion of the Babylonians was back then, and like how it differed. And it was just basically like a question about the Babylonian religion. And for anybody who knows me and knows, like, I love biblical history, I love religious history, and I've done a lot of that research, and I've done videos of it in the past. So I just took this as an open door. And I basically just responded with kind of like a summary of the Babylonian religion and the religions of this world. And so I'm going to kind of give you my response to this, as well as kind of how this led into um, that sister's video with being Abarit. Um, so, in summary, what I said to this brother was that the Babylonians basically worshipped a host of heavenly beings. And they believed or knew of the God of gods. They called him the invisible God. Um, and this is really interesting because it's like in contrast to like when we're in school and we're taught like public school, right? When we go to public school and we're taught history, we're taught religious history, it's taught all broken up in chunks to where like one culture came up with this crazy religion to explain natural phenomena and it's all made up. And then here's another culture that came up with its own religion with its own gods and it's all made up. And so you study all these different cultures throughout history with all their different religions, and you just sort of learn to kind of just lump them all together in like made up human stuff. And then the Bible, and you know what most of us grew up understanding of Christianity, like the biggest religion, like you lump that and like the Bible up in with like the rest of these religions of like humans just making stuff up. And it can be really confusing to like sort through all of this stuff, like what is real, what is fake. But in all reality, if you look at other religions from the beginning of time and you just look at history without breaking it all apart, and you study human history as a whole, and you really look at what these religions are saying and the names of these deities, you actually see that they're all related. Basically, the ancient Babylonian culture, which is where we're at right now in Daniel. I guess I'm going to put a little pin in it because it's worth talking about. What I was mentioning was in Daniel, this is in the Babylonian captivity, they spoke Aramaic rather than biblical Hebrew. This is the transition of the Hebrew history where Hebrew became not spoken and they took up Aramaic. And in this text, Daniel refers to Yah instead of Elohim or Yahuwah. He says what a lot of people on this app will say is like Alua, or uh, yeah, Alua is probably like the most common. But the text, the words or the characters, like looking at the actual Hebrew text, it's more accurately like pronounced like Alaha, Alaha. Um, and so this is really interesting because, like, obviously Aramaic then led into what we know of as Arabic, and like those religions over there most commonly practice Islam, where they call God Allah. So that was like the original point of me sending. Like, I found that very interesting of how, in Daniel we start to see God as referenced as Allah, which it's not super important, but I just found that interesting. And that conversation is what led into this whole thing of, at this time in Babylonia, like, what did they believe? Like, what would their experience or understanding be of encountering, the power of powers through Daniel? Um, and so the Babylonians, and I'm rambling now, this is already a long video, but the Babylonians believed and worshiped an entire group of heavenly beings. And it's the same heavenly beings that was worshiped pre-flood in ancient Sumerian texts and stuff like that. I mean, we've got Thoth and Enki, and leading into, we've got like Marduk and Ishtar and Dionysus, and like through all these different stages of human history, it's the same fallen angels, the same heavenly beings and their offspring that are being worshipped throughout history, just with different names, different faces. They present themselves differently. And the point of all this, I promise I'm getting to it. Like, why does this come back into what does it mean to be Abarit? The whole point of it is because these other religions knew that there was another God. They knew that Yahuwah existed, but they didn't know him because Yahuwah chose Israel and worked and encountered, or like brought himself in his presence to Israel. All the other nations were assigned other angels above them. They had their own deities. And so they knew that Yahuwah existed, but they didn't really have access. And you see that Yahuwah spoke to Balaam, Yahuwah spoke to Koresh, the king of Persia. Yahuwah interacted with other nations at times. They were aware of him. They knew who they were speaking to when they spoke of him, but to them they were not accessible. And to him, like, he required holiness and access that they didn't have. So all these other nations chose to venerate or to worship the other deities that they had access to, the other deities that had faces attached to them, that had names attached to them, that had like something more tangible and physical that they can attach themselves to in this reality. And this is where it comes to the point of being Abarit. Because what that sister talked about was Abarit means one who crossed over, right? And she talks about it, the Abarit people being crossed into covenant. It can represent, crossing from death to life, one, from the wilderness crossing into the promised land. But the whole point of this is actually about spiritual versus the physical, flesh to spirit, death to light, going from spiritual, or going from physical sight to spiritual sight. And this is the point of being Hebrew. You have to, in order to believe in Yahuwah, you have to be able to put your faith in something that you cannot see with your physical eyes. Like, this is why idolatry was so serious, because it goes backwards on what it means to be Hebrew, is you need to learn to see spiritually and not physically. The other nations are stuck in the physical. This whole world is about getting us stuck in this physical reality and seeing with our physical eyes. Whereas Yahuwah, and the whole point of Messiah coming, was to shine a light to open our spiritual eyes, to cross over from physical into the spiritual. And so that was a long, now 10-minute video, and I am not going to do it again. But I just found that that was really, really interesting, that the point of this walk is to learn to be spiritual in nature, not physical. And we see that in the Old Testament and now the New Testament. So anyway, I'm making more videos. Shalom. Love you all.